The Boeing 747 rattled like a toy in the fists of the storm. Rain hammered the windows, lightning tore open the sky, and then, over the intercom, a trembling voice cracked. "Captain Hayes is unconscious. I need immediate assistance from anyone with combat aviation training. Please." Panic spread like wildfire. Children cried, passengers whispered prayers, others typed farewell messages with shaking hands. And in row 17A, a 32-year-old black woman slowly opened her eyes. Aaliyah Johnson. To strangers, she looked ordinary, just another tired traveler in jeans and a simple blouse. But her past carried a truth that could change the fate of everyone on board. The co-pilot's voice broke again. "We are flying blind through one of the worst storms in North Atlantic history. If there is a fighter pilot on this plane, I beg you, stand up now." But silence filled the cabin. No one looked at her. No one believed. What would you do if the only person capable of saving 312 souls was the one the world overlooked? Backhand index pointing right. If you believe no one should ever be ignored, share this story. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this must be heard. Before she was just another passenger in row 17A, Aaliyah Johnson lived a life shaped by discipline, sacrifice, and silence. At 32, she carried herself with the calm grace of someone who had seen storms far greater than thunder and lightning. Back home in Atlanta, mornings meant the smell of strong coffee drifting through her small apartment, her sneakers by the door still dusted with yesterday's run. Neighbors would nod respectfully as she passed, no one really knowing her history, only that she was polite, quiet, and always seemed to be somewhere between here and somewhere else. What most didn't see were the faded photographs she kept tucked inside an old shoebox. Her in uniform, standing tall beside a roaring fighter jet, her father's proud hand resting on her shoulder. They didn't know about the nights she slept in deserts or the times she flew through skies filled with tracer fire. To them, she was just Aaliyah, the woman who worked long shifts at the community center, who sometimes helped teenagers with their college essays, who always stayed behind to clean up after everyone left. But microaggressions had a way of reminding her that the world didn't see her strength. At the grocery store, an older white man once asked if she was qualified to use the self-checkout. At her last job interview, a manager had smiled and said, "You're impressive, but we were expecting someone more polished." She had smiled back, but inside, every word chipped at her. Still, Aaliyah moved forward. Her resilience wasn't born from privilege. It was carved from battles fought in silence. She learned to rest anywhere, a crowded bus, a noisy train, or like today, in a cramped airplane seat. Years of missions had taught her that rest was survival, and survival was victory. This flight was supposed to be ordinary. Just a trip to visit her younger sister, Maya, and meet her newborn niece for the first time. She had boarded with nothing more than a worn backpack, a paperback novel, and a quiet hope that for once, life could be simple. But simplicity has a way of shattering when the world refuses to see who you are. And as the storm outside gathered strength, so too did the invisible storm within the cabin. A storm that would soon force Aaliyah out of the shadows she had so carefully built. The storm outside grew wilder, like the sky itself was tearing apart. Inside the cabin, fear spread in waves. A baby cried until its voice broke. A teenager clutched his mother's arm so tightly his knuckles turned white, and somewhere near first class, an old woman whispered verses under her breath, her rosary trembling in her hand. The intercom crackled again. Co-pilot Daniel Brooks, only 30 years old, was trying to steady his voice, but it betrayed him with every word. "Ladies and gentlemen, I can't do this alone. We are flying through one of the worst storms on record. Our captain isn't breathing. I need a fighter pilot, someone with combat training. Please identify yourself." Gasps filled the air, but no one moved. In row 3A, Edward Collins, 47, straightened his imported Italian suit jacket and stood up, his voice booming across the terrified silence. "Listen here, kid," he barked toward the cockpit. "My brother-in-law is a private pilot. I've flown with him dozens of times. I know enough to get this bird steady." A flight attendant rushed to him, her voice sharp with urgency. "Sir, this isn't a private Cessna in calm weather. We need someone with military precision. Civilian training won't be enough to land in these conditions." Edward puffed out his chest, his arrogance louder than the thunder. "Are you doubting me? I paid $15,000 for these first-class seats. Trust me, I have more experience than anyone else on this plane." Some passengers clapped weakly, desperate for any kind of hope. Others muttered under their breath, exchanging doubtful glances. Meanwhile, in row 17A, Aaliyah sat motionless. Her breathing was calm, her eyes fixed on the seat in front of her. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, even in silence. No one looked her way, not even once. To them, she was invisible. A 32-year-old black woman, traveling alone, wearing jeans and a simple blouse. Surely, she couldn't be the hero. Surely, someone else, someone wealthier, someone whiter, someone male, would take charge. The turbulence worsened. The plane dropped suddenly, sending screams rippling through the cabin. Coffee cups tumbled to the floor, luggage rattled in overhead bins, and the air filled with the sour stench of fear. Aaliyah's mind raced back to another storm, years ago. She was 24, flying a combat jet through enemy territory, the night sky alive with tracer fire. Her commanding officer's voice had filled her headset then, calm and commanding. "Johnson, stay steady. Don't let the noise get inside your head. Fly the plane, not the fear." She shook the memory away. This wasn't the time for hesitation. And yet she stayed still. Why? Because she knew what would happen if she stood up. The stares. The disbelief. The mocking tone of men like Edward Collins who would sneer. Her? She can't even reach the pedals. The intercom crackled again, Daniel's voice cracking under pressure. "We are flying blind, and I have never faced anything like this alone. Please, if there is anyone who has served as a fighter pilot, please come forward." Whispers broke out around her. A middle-aged man muttered, "What are the chances of a fighter pilot just sitting here?" A woman scoffed. If there was one, he'd have spoken up already. He. The word burned in Aaliyah's ears. Edward Collins raised his hand dramatically, drawing all eyes back to himself. "I told you I can do this. Let me in that cockpit." His wife, Sophia Collins, 45, clung to his arm, whispering, "Edward, please don't." But Edward was intoxicated by the attention. He sneered down the aisle, his gaze brushing past Aaliyah like she was furniture. "Unless one of you nobodies has a better idea?" That was the breaking point. Aaliyah stood. Slowly. Quietly. Every movement deliberate. She didn't wave her hands or shout for attention. She didn't need to. The way she carried herself, calm, centered, precise, spoke louder than any performance. Passengers turned, one by one, surprise flickering across their faces. Whispers hissed through the air. "Who's she? What's she doing?" "That woman." Edward laughed out loud, disbelief dripping from his tone. "Oh, this is rich. You. What are you going to do? Pray the storm away." Aaliyah didn't flinch. She locked eyes with the nearest flight attendant, her voice steady, unshaken. "I'm Aaliyah Johnson, former United States Air Force. F-16 combat pilot. 26 missions logged. Get me to the cockpit now." The entire cabin fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The flight attendant blinked, her breath catching. She had expected panic, arrogance, excuses, but not this. Not quiet certainty. Without hesitation, she grabbed the intercom. "Co-pilot Brooks? We have someone you need to meet." For the first time since the announcement, hope flickered through the cabin. But as Aaliyah stepped into the aisle, Edward shoved past, his voice rising again. "This is insane. You're just going to trust her? She could be lying for all we know. I'm telling you, I have more flying experience than." The plane lurched violently, cutting him off. People screamed as oxygen masks tumbled from overhead compartments. A child cried out for her mother. The storm was reaching its peak. And in that chaos, Aaliyah moved forward, calm, unshaken, a woman who had slept through storms before but was now fully awake. This was no longer about invisibility. This was about survival. Hers. Theirs. Everyone's. And there was no turning back. The cockpit door swung open with a metallic click, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow into a tunnel. Aaliyah Johnson, 32 years old, stepped inside, the storm's chaos flashing like fire through the windshield. Captain Robert Hayes, 55, lay slumped to one side, his skin pale, his breath shallow. Beside him, co-pilot Daniel Brooks, only 30, was drenched in sweat, his hands trembling as he gripped the controls. Warning alarms screamed, red lights blinking like furious eyes. The smell of overheated metal filled the air. The plane shuddered violently, dropping again. Passengers behind them wailed in terror. Daniel looked at her, disbelief battling with desperation. "You're the fighter pilot?" Aaliyah didn't flinch. "Yes. Move over." There was no hesitation in her tone. No need for explanations or ego. Just command. The kind that comes from years of staring death in the face. Daniel froze for a second, then nodded, sliding aside. Aaliyah slipped into the captain's seat, her fingers wrapping around the yoke like they had been waiting for this moment. Another violent jolt threw Daniel against the panel. The aircraft groaned under the storm's fury. Outside, sheets of rain slapped against the glass, and lightning carved the sky open like a knife. Aaliyah's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. Hydraulics are weak. Engines 2 and 3 are stalling. Altitude dropping too fast. She rattled off numbers with a calm precision that stunned Daniel. Behind her, the flight attendant's voice trembled over the intercom. Please remain seated. Fasten your seatbelts. Stay calm. But calm was impossible. In the cabin, people screamed, prayed, and held onto each other as if the sky itself had turned against them. And then Edward Collins. His voice pierced through the chaos, muffled but arrogant as ever. This is insane. She'll kill us all. Put me in there. I can fix it. Daniel clenched his jaw, fury flashing for the first time. He turned, slamming the door shut in Edward's face. The lock clicked. Silence, except for the storm and the alarms. Aaliyah adjusted the controls, her movements swift, surgical. But the storm wasn't easing. A flash of lightning blinded the cockpit. The plane tilted hard to the left, and alarms shrieked louder. For a split second, Daniel's breath caught. He thought this was the end. But Aaliyah's voice cut through, low and sharp. Stay with me. We're not done. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of countless missions. She pitched the nose, balanced the throttle, fought the storm with a precision that felt almost unnatural. Inside her, memories clawed their way back. The roar of combat, the voices of comrades lost, the endless hours where one mistake meant death. Sweat rolled down her temple, her jaw tight, but her eyes never left the instruments. Daniel's voice cracked. We're losing altitude too fast. If we don't stabilize, we will. Aaliyah's tone was steel. Lock in with me. He followed her lead, matching her commands. For the first time, his hands stopped shaking. He felt the rhythm of her control, the quiet authority of someone who had flown through worse than storms. The plane bucked violently, thunder exploding so loud it rattled their bones. Oxygen masks dangled in the cabin. Somewhere behind the door, a child screamed, "I don't want to die!" And those words hit Aaliyah like a knife. Because once, years ago, she had been the child praying for a pilot to save her. Once, she had sat in the back of a C-130, hearing the engine struggle, clutching her little sister's hand, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Not again. Not this time. Her grip tightened. Her voice dropped to a whisper only Daniel could hear. We're going to save them. All of them. She pulled hard on the yoke, muscles burning, as the plane fought her back like a living beast. Daniel shouted numbers, she corrected with instinct. They became a unit, her leading, him following, their breaths sinking with every desperate maneuver. The storm screamed louder, but so did Aaliyah's resolve. Every second stretched like eternity. The passengers were silent now, their fate hanging in the hands of the woman they had overlooked, doubted, dismissed. And in that moment, amidst chaos, arrogance, and the shadow of death, Aaliyah Johnson proved that she was not invisible. She was the only thing standing between life and catastrophe. The breaking point had arrived. And she was ready. The storm broke just as suddenly as it had swallowed them. One final jolt, one last scream of engines pushing against the impossible, and then silence. The Boeing 747 steadied, gliding through a pocket of calm air. Outside, the clouds began to part, revealing the faint shimmer of dawn on the horizon. For the first time in what felt like forever, the passengers could breathe. In the cockpit, Aaliyah Johnson released the yoke slowly, her hands trembling only now, when it was safe. Beside her, co-pilot Daniel Brooks exhaled, his chest heaving, his eyes shining with something close to awe. You just saved 312 lives. Aaliyah didn't answer. She just stared out at the rising sun, her heartbeat still echoing in her ears. She knew the truth. She hadn't done this for recognition. She had done it because no one else could. Behind the locked door, the cabin had transformed. Mothers held their children tighter, tears of relief streaming down their cheeks. Strangers embraced as if they had known each other all their lives. And yet, in the first-class row, Edward Collins sat stiff, his jaw clenched, his pride cracked but not broken. His wife looked at him with quiet disappointment, the kind that lingers far longer than anger. When the plane finally landed, paramedics rushed Captain Hayes onto a stretcher. Daniel followed, still shaking, repeating to every official he saw. It wasn't me. It was her. Aaliyah Johnson. She flew us through hell. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Aaliyah kept her head low, slipping through the chaos with the same quiet grace she had always carried. To the world, she might still be invisible. To her, it didn't matter. She knew who she was. She knew what she had done. But among the passengers, whispers began to spread. That woman saved us. No one believed her at first. Imagine 300 lives owed to someone we overlooked. For many, that flight would become a story they told for the rest of their lives. But for Aaliyah, it was something else. It was proof that invisibility could end, that strength could not always be denied. Still, the injustice lingered. Why had no one believed in her? Why had her skin, her gender, her silence made her unthinkable as a savior? The system, the stares, the assumptions, all of it had tried to keep her in the shadows. But the storm had forced the truth into the open. And now, the passengers had to live with the knowledge. The woman they almost ignored had carried them all through death's door. Aaliyah walked away from the airport that day without fanfare. No medals, no headlines, just a quiet strength in her step. She would meet her sister, hold her newborn niece, and smile as if nothing had happened. But deep inside, she carried the storm with her, a reminder of who she was and who the world still refused to see. And maybe that was the greatest injustice of all, because the question still hangs in the air, long after the plane touched ground. If you had been there, would you have stood up for her? Or would you have stayed silent like everyone else? Backhand index pointing right, this story isn't just hers. It's a reflection of our world. If it unsettled you, then the conversation cannot end here. Share this. Talk about it, because awareness is the first step to change. And don't forget to subscribe, because these stories matter, and silence only protects the cruel.